Peter Schiff has a record of accurately predicting and analyzing financial markets and the state of the economy. He has recently raised a final warning that the U.S. is about to experience a new form of economic crisis. If you want to know how to save yourself in the middle of this crisis, watch this video to the end. But first, subscribe to Market Magnets and smash the notification bell to not miss any of our following videos. Following the 1.6% decrease in the GDP, that is the gross domestic product of the United States of America, in the first quarter of 2022, the economist Peter Schiff has warned that the United States is about to face the worst economic recession, worse than that of the Great Recession, which occurred in 2008. GDP, according to Wikipedia, is a monetary measure of the market value of all the final goods produced at a specific time by a country. With the current state of things in the economy, avoiding a recession might be inevitable, identified by a fall in GDP. However, the government has refused to acknowledge that the economy is in a recession, while claiming that inflation is what needs to be tackled. Inflation means an increase in prices and a fall in purchasing power of money. In a tweet that Schiff posted on his Twitter page, he emphasized that the administration of Joe Biden will come to a point where they will have no choice but to acknowledge that the United States economy has been battling a recession since the beginning of the year. Schiff added that the high inflation and rate hikes would only worsen the recession. The Bureau of Economic Analysis report showed that the first 3 months of 2022 had a far lesser GDP than anticipated. The GDP was reduced by 1.5%. However, the first quarter of 2021 experienced a hike in the GDP by 6.9%. So what did the feds and the government have to say about the poor state of the GDP of the first quarter of 2022? The feds and government blamed the decrease in private inventory investment, declining exports, and federal, state, and local spending. The last time such a drop in real GDP was experienced was during the second quarter of 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In one of his interviews, Schiff noted that a strong labor market is not an overall indicator of the state of an economy. Schiff also pointed out that the White House and the Federal Reserve have decided to turn a blind eye to the state of the real GDP. Schiff said in an interview that this impending economic crisis would hit more than the Great Recession of 2008. The reckless Federal Reserve policy, monetary policy, and government fiscal policy have helped to drive the economy to this point. Schiff also explained that the financial market might be experiencing a different kind of change. Schiff considered inflation to be the most important factor in this coming recession. It is important not just to consider the effect of inflation on consumer goods and services and prices of assets. It is more important to look into its effects on an area like taxation. In simple terms, the effect of inflation trickles down to taxes. The U.S. government funds its expenditures through two major means: taxation and borrowing funds from a private lender. This lender, in turn, buys the United States Treasury bond from the government. When the government borrows money, they are simply delaying the taxation of such borrowed funds to the future. The government would have to pay back the borrowed funds. So, how do they get to pay them back? Through taxes that will be paid in the future. However, the current taxpayers are paying the interest generated from the borrowed funds. Whenever the government funds any of its expenditures by selling treasury bonds, that is, borrowing money, it greatly affects taxpayers. The money borrowed and interest accrued must be paid. The current situation has the government in a tight corner, as they have to think of new ways to finance government expenditures as they can no longer borrow from private lenders. This is because the government can no longer afford to pay such high interest rates due to the current large amount of debt the United States is in. The United States government, rather than acknowledging the not-so-good state of the economy, preferred to keep borrowing funds in an attempt to salvage things, leading to an accumulation of debt to nearly $30 trillion US. There is no way the government can pay off this debt. Schiff explained that assuming the government was to pay the normal rate on the debt, they still couldn't meet up because of the huge debt principal incurred. That brings us to the question of how the U.S. government is funding its expenditures if it can no longer borrow funds from private lenders. According to Schiff, the US government is now funding its expenditures through inflation. This works because the Federal Reserve buys debt issued by the government. In doing so, the money supply expands. A debt borrowed by the government does not affect the money supply because the government is only an intermediary between the lender and the receiver. There is no increase in money circulation. It just changes from one hand to the other with high interest rates. However, in a situation where the Federal Reserve prints money to fund the debt, it is new spending in the economy, leading to increased money circulation. In regard to this explanation, Schiff gave a practical example using income tax. Your income tax is automatically removed from your salary, and as a result of this, your purchasing power and standard of living are reduced. So the government, in turn, gives this money to someone else, and this person now gets to spend the money taken from you. This leaves the money circulation in the same state. However, imagine a scenario where the feds print more money instead of the government removing the income tax. What happens is your purchasing power and standard of living remain the same. However, the downside is that you now have an extra person who has all their money to buy or do whatever they want. So the result is you have to compete with this person to buy things. Also, according to the law of supply and demand, since there is a higher demand due to the higher money circulation rate and the supply remaining the same, prices of commodities start to surge. Everything becomes more expensive because the government takes away the purchasing power of your money. This reduces the number of things you can afford, instead of taking it from you originally through tax. Meanwhile, what happened in that scenario is another form of taxation. Since the pandemic of 2020, the government has lost control of debts and money printing. In one of Schiff's statements, Schiff said that he believes the feds print half of the money spent by the government now. So the story is no longer to borrow and spend, but to print and spend. The alarming thing is that people aren't paying attention to this situation. People now believe there is no limit to the money the feds can print, and the government is free to print money as they please. This school of thought will only lead us all to a dead end. Schiff clearly distinguished between what it means to print money and what it means to earn it. When you earn money, you go out there and make yourself useful. Your labor contributes to the production of relevant goods and services in society. You, in turn, get paid based on your level of usefulness or significance as you move up the rank. You use this money to buy the same goods and services you help produce based on your purchasing power. However, in contrast, when the feds print money, people collect and spend it. As a result, there will be a spike in the unemployment rate when the government offers paychecks to unemployed people who have been of no benefit in production. What happens is that the limited production supply will meet higher demand from unemployed people who have money to spend, leading to a massive spike in the prices of commodities. The Federal Reserve has promised higher inflation rates, which they would deliver and over-deliver. However, higher inflation is not a good thing. Not only does higher inflation make prices go up, but it also prevents prices from coming down. People do not want a high living cost, which is not capitalism. Schiff explains that real capitalism is when productive businesses are efficient, leading to lower cost of production, and then to higher demand due to lower prices of goods and commodities. So more people can afford to buy more commodities they may need, resulting in a higher standard of living. With the actions of the government and the Fed, it is evident that they are doing what is best for the government, not the people and the economy. People must wake up and realize the predicament we are all in, and how things are about to go from bad to worse. The government is trying to cover the tracks of its reckless monetary policy by keeping interest rates artificially low, so the bondholders and the people will not realize how fragile the economy is. The feds justify this action by claiming that there is not enough inflation. The US, which used to be the highest creditor, now has the highest debt. It's no longer a matter of doubt that the administration of Joe Biden will increase taxes. The inevitable crisis will not only affect that of the economy, but also of the dollar. How can you invest wisely during this whole financial crisis? Schiff's advice in regards to this is quite simple. The last time something like this happened was the late 1970s. Even though this was much worse, commodities like gold, oil, and other commodity prices skyrocketed as the US dollar collapsed. Schiff believes that the dollar will not just experience a collapse, but also a crash. So the best decision you can make right now is to bow out of US dollar assets, especially US bonds. Bondholders will be the biggest losers because bonds will be exchanged for dollars in the future. So the value declines as the dollar collapses. As the dollar is predicted to crash, it will also crash. Investments related to commodities will do well during this crash. So one of the things Schiff advises is to store physical gold as a store of value. Schiff advises against storing Bitcoin because Bitcoin is not a good store of value. He says, you can't store what you don't have. Schiff has always been known to side with the yellowish substance called gold and considers it to be the best store of value. Storing gold is storing the future importance of gold as a metal. Gold has diverse uses in various sectors, giving it a high value. However, Schiff believes that if you want to get even richer, you should invest in gold stocks, as they have the probability of going up and booming. However, remember the saying, no pain, no gain. Schiff believes the upside of owning gold stocks, being weighed, is more than the downside. Making a wise and informed financial decision might save you during this coming economic crisis of the US market and the dollar. Do you think the United States can stop this impending economic crisis? Please leave your answers in the comments section below.